Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome to, you know, reading. Reading today is Kojeve's uh, 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 note, Notion of Authority, which is a little Kojev little book, a preliminary presentation, a little brief thing. What was this book? Well, this was written by Kojev in basically 1942, 41, 42, when he was working in at the time occupied not occupied France, but he was working for Vichy and trying to consult. Now, some people say he was in the resistance, of this, but he was also a member. He was consulting and trying to influence the Vichy government, and that he held his. In other words, this is a letter dated 9 from Henry Mosset, a senior minister of the Vichy government, but also close friends to the royal family, acknowledge the receipt of notion. Right. It is known of instance of Kojev's dispatched a voluminous Russian manuscript to Stalin and the Russian people in 1941 via the Soviet embassy in Paris, and that in 1945 he prepared memorandums to Jean Philippe of the French foreign policy. A version is best known as the Latin Empire. He's the Latin Empire. So he was known. In other words, in Kojev's lifetime, it was widely likely that the manuscript was shared in acquaintances within the French government and read by some of the intellectual intercourse. Now, um, uh, this is why this is a very controversial book. Because how it was written. It was written to the minister of Baton and people around the Baton government. Now, even though he was seen with that, he was remember he wrote something to Stalin, right? He becomes after the 45 regime in France. In France, he becomes part of the bureaucracy. Right. This is that and plays a very important role for the French in the delegation of the General Treaty of Tariff and Trade. Right. Kojev is a very interesting character. Um, he was influenced by Heidegger, seeing lectures. He was a Russian immigrant living in Germany, studying in German universities. He um, was affected by Heidegger's, as many people were, Heidegger's lectures in the 30s, late 20s and early 30s, late 20s, the 1920s, the young Heidegger. His stars, his famous debate with Cassirer at Davos was one of those ground-shaking intellectual events. Um, and Kojev hung out with bunch of Jew- Jewish slash German intellectuals. One of them was, a friend of uh, Strauss. Strauss met Kojev in France when Strauss left Germany via the Rockefeller thing. Spent some time in France before going to England, right? Um, and got to know through his other contacts that he had. Got to know and had a strong relationship with Kojève. In fact, Strauss and Kojève will have a very long-term relationship. Strauss will write to Kojève and his correspondence. Strauss will even puts one of his new after his turn to kind of a new discovery of the Greek writers when he went to America. He wrote a book, a translation and an edit of Cicero's Xenophon's on tyranny, which the hero, right, which he calls on tyranny. The subtitle is the title in Xenophon is on hero, but the subtitle is on tyranny, and that Strauss has a translation made of Xenophon and does a little book, and then has a commentary about the hero and its importance. He then sends it to Kojève. Kojève writes a review, writes it in one of the French magazines, and then Strauss so loves the comment that we should maybe do an edition in France that adds this comment to the French edition, and then Strauss will have a reply to Kojève. This will be done translated in. It's done in by Kojève. Eventually, does this, and friends of Kojève edits this. Then Strauss does his reply. um, it's not an epilogue. He doesn't use the word epilogue, but it's a reply where he first replies to the review by Vogelin, and then later this review by Kojeve, and he gets into this. Kojeve's thing is like tyranny and wisdom, famous tyranny and wisdom, and that becomes a very big debate between Strauss and Kojeve. But Kojeve's influence on Europe was very much so in France. On Kojeve's lectures on Hegel in the 1930s really shaped French intellectuals. There's all the postmodern thinkers really are really influenced out of Heidegger contact through Kojeve. So why this book? Why not do the Manifest of Hegel, which is the Hegel thing, or one of other Kojeve or Strauss? The I don't want to do Strauss. You can watch Milliman. Milliman. I love Strauss myself, but I don't think I want to really. Maybe I will do Strauss eventually, but um, uh, um, I'd rather do something. Why this? Because I think this is as much as a classic as Schmidt's concept for what Schmidt's concept of the political does. This is and by the way, you can see this is very much influenced by, I think, his contact with Strauss. His contact with Strauss does because it's Strauss who correspondence to him in the 30s, while Strauss is in England, who correspond to Kojeve in France before the war, before the invasion. Um, uh, um, Before Strauss then leaves to America in 39, I think 39, 38, 39, um, before the war. Um, why is this kind of important in this sense? Because I think Strauss influences this. That this is why the Plato and Aristotle thing is in here to some degree. So, okay, let's turn to it. Let's start the why this little book on authority. Um, this book is actually very important because it highlights a discussion that is occurring. Maybe this is why sometime I might find the need to look at Weber's discussion of Herrenschaft, which is very important. Max Weber and his discussion of Herrenschaft, which I think should get more attention. Um, why it doesn't? It's I think because it's um, he died and really didn't order his books together. His wife did. They collected the volumes, and really it's needed more work, and probably he needed to write more. Yes, he died in his 50s, and he was prolific, but I think his real his turn to the political and economic just turns nearly at the last few years of his life following post World War, the First World War, and that therefore his discussion of like the three types of Herrenschaft, the three concepts of legitimacy of Herrenschaft, and what Herrenschaft ruling, or even leadership means, right? And therefore, the same thing with authority. This is why the concept of authority, the notion of authority, and this little book on authority, it's about ruling. What does ruling mean? What is ruling, and the idealities of ruling, and how does one have authority? What is authority? How does it do? Usually authority is tied to ruling or having command over somebody. So let's start with the preliminary remarks. Okay, I'm introducing it, so this might be a little odd. I'm going to be doing this unlike there's no real chapter. There are chapters in here, but it's so ill balanced. I'm going to be doing it by pages in some degree. I've sketched out a structure of pages. Um, so I'll list the pages I'm doing it on this edition. This is the most common English translation edition. If you read the French, you can figure out the pages. It's not going to be that difficult to go through it. I'm skipping the introduction to the French edition. I'm going to start only with the actual text by Kojeve, starting with the preliminary remarks and then the body of the text. And I may or may not do the appendices. Okay. Um, so let's turn to the work. Okay. Um, it is a curious fact that the problem and notion of authority has been little studied. Questions pertaining to the transfer of authority and its genius has been the main concern. So, how the transfer of authority and the origins of authority. But the concept of authority, while the actual essence of this phenomena has rarely attracted any attention. So, the genesis of it, how it came to be, and how it's transferred, this has been the mainstay of people's concerns. But the actual understanding of what it is really hasn't been addressed. It's, I think, in many ways, is because everyone assumes that it is what it is, and it's self-evident, right? However, it is obviously impossible to tackle political power or even the structure of the state without knowing what authority is as such. A study of the notion of authority, albeit provisional, is therefore essential and must precede any study of the question of the state. So, therefore, this idea that, in other words, a study of authority, no matter how provisional, must come prior to any question of the state. To say that theories of authority are not lacking is to say that there are, in other words, to say that theories of authority are lacking is not to say that they're non existent. If we forget about variance, we can say that four distinct and essentially different and irreducible theories have been proposed in the course of history. He's going to start out with the first one. One, the theological or theocratic theory, semicolon, primacy and absolute authority belongs to God. All other relative authorities are derived from it. It's wind, and lure are derived from it. This theory was elaborated by the scholastics, but partisans of legitimate, not to say hereditary monarchy, also claim it as their own. So it's not only the idea here is those of hereditary monarchy does it, the scholastics, St. Augustine, he would say scholastics, but I would say St. Augustine concept of this in city of God and the early church, maybe even Mosaic law, the idea of the theology of even the Quran. Look at Romans 13, that all authority comes from God, right? In the New Testament. The Bible, the biblical authority, religion, it comes from religion, right? Two, Plato's theory. Just or legitimate authority is based on and emanates from justice or equity. Any authority that has a different character is a pseudo authority. That is, in reality, nothing other than a more or less brute force. So, authority does not mean brute force. It means a power that gets you to act, right? That you should obey me, that you listen to me because, not by force, not by mere brute force. That you do so, and it's right for me to act. And it's from justice. Justice. In other words, legitimate authority is based on justice or equity, and that any authority that is different from this is a pseudo thing that relies on force. So that's Platonic. Now, I might argue that he's flipped Aristotle and Plato. Okay, because I think he's flipped Aristotle and Plato. I think what he says is Plato is really Aristotle, and what he says about Aristotle is really Plato. Aristotle's theory, in which the justification for authority is found in wisdom, knowledge, and the possibility of anticipating or transcending the immediate present. Now, I can see why. Okay, I can see this. I can see why he says that, because that is book one of the Politics, where he says the question of that what formulates koinonia is this either this foresight or procreation, that we have a natural lust to leave one behind, but also the idea of foresight, that the one who knows should have authority over the one who doesn't know. But in that's very Platonic. Okay, that is the Socratic position. And that what he says about Plato. So therefore, we can argue that both Plato and Aristotle argue these two different understandings. You can find both 2 and 3, both in Aristotle and Plato. Plato's what he does this. So therefore, justice, the idea of justices. So he's going to say, for purposes of this, Plato is going to be about justice and an equity, right? And that for Plato, for Aristotle theory, Aristotle is about knowledge, right? A wisdom, knowledge, and a possibility of anticipating of transcending the immediate present. Now, for Hegel, not Hobbes or anything, but Hegel. Hegel's theory reduces the relationship of authority to that of master and slave, of victor and vanquished, the former having been ready to risk his life to be recognized, while the latter chose submission over death. So the master slave. This is he for Kojeve, Hegel's master slave dialectic in the Phenomenology of Spirit. Again, that's why that book on the Phenomenology of Spirit is so. His lectures in the 1930s on phenomenon is so important because it's the master slave dialectic. The master slave dialectic in Hegel becomes the engine to understand the process of history and the process of the different epochs of history. And those are different political structures and political systems because that those epochs create and produce. But again, these are the four things. So therefore, the master-slave dialectic. So therefore, we have that all authority comes from God, justice, knowledge or wisdom, and the master-slave dialectic of those who risk their lives of recognition and those who choose submission over death. Unfortunately, only the last theory has received comprehensive philosophical elaboration, not only at the level of phenomenological description, but also that of metaphysical and ontological analysis. His own, right? A little bit of self-referencing here, right? No, but also Heidegger and other people in the 30s have talked about Hegel's, that this has been kind of addressed. The remaining theories have not gone beyond the level of phenomenology, um, uh, and are not, moreover, in any way complete, even in this department. It must be said that Hegel's theory has never been truly understood, and that it was completely forgotten. Thus, Hegel's most important successor, Marx, completely neglected the problem of authority. So this is the criticism of Marx, that Marx says as he neglects the complete problem of authority. All four theories are exclusive. Each of them acknowledge only one type of authority, namely the one it describes, and sees in the other authoritarian phenomena nothing other than a manifestation of pure and simple force. Note, there is certainly yet another theory of authority, which sees in the latter nothing but the manifestation of force. There is certainly yet another theory of authority which sees in the latter nothing but the inferior force. We shall see later that force has nothing to do with authority, being even its direct opposite. Reducing authority to force is therefore simply either to deny or ignore the existence of the former. It is for this reason that we have not listed this erroneous opinion among the theories of authority. In other words, force is one argument could be force. That is what force is the basis of authority. Coercion, force is the basis. Power, those who have power have this, have the a force. Now he's saying, sorry, no, that force has nothing to do with authority, being its direct opposite. Authority is the opposite of force, and this is very interesting. Uh, uh, um, uh, there is something about authority implies something. Now, it might have coercion. This does not say there's no coercion, but it's not saying that it's force. In other words, force may play a role in authority, a limited role, but it's not the main rationale of it. And his point is that this idea that these are the rationales, the fundamental rationale of this, and therefore force cannot be. It's not denial of the other rationale. It is for this reason. Now, because it is such a, in other words, reducing authority to force is simply to deny or to ignore the existence of the former. In other words, it denies authority. It is for this reason he's not erroneous opinion. Now, in order to be able to judge and criticize these theories, Indeed, to understand them in the proper sense of the word, one would have to start by drawing up a comprehensive list of all phenomena that could be filled under the rubric authority, and see if these phenomena correspond, in whole or in part, to one or several of the proposed theories. Theories for which there are no corresponding types are to be rejected as false. As the ones remaining, we must see whether they account for all or only parts of the phenomena. To this end, the phenomena of authority must be subjected to phenomenological analysis, with a view to unearthing pure phenomena, that is to say, those that are reducible to one another, or showing, in the case of compound phenomena, the pure element of which they are made up. So therefore, what we have to see what it is. They have to find a thing that defines it, and if it's in compound things, well, what are they composed of? If we find pure phenomena that none of the suggested theories account for, further theories must be formulated. So if you find other phenomena that the existing four theories don't do it, then we have to do another formulated. But if we have compounds, then the compounds. In other words, if it has a part of one or this, or a mixture of these, then that's a compound. But on a pure thing, a pure phenomena, a phenomena that only has one phenomena, a pure phenomena that has none of the theories are accounted for, then you have to create a new theory must be added. In other words, the phenomenological analysis, section A1, verse A, part 1, must answer the question, what is it? So the purpose of phenomenological analysis is to answer the question, the what is question. And that is the fundamental philosophy question. This is the Socratic question, what is? What is it? What is it? Okay. In other words, I answer the question, what it is. Addressed to all phenomena in the manner of speaking, we call instinctively as authoritarian. So in other words, what is it? Addressing all phenomena in a manner of speaking, we qualified instinctively as authoritarian. It must reveal the essence, the idea, das Wissen, of authority as such, as well as the structure of this essence. That is to say, the various irreducible types of its manifestation, while ignoring accidental variations caused by simple deviance in local and temporal conditions of the realization of authority as such. Therefore, we're going to only pay to the core of the structure, its essence, its character, and ignore variations that are just due to local and temporal conditions of the realization of the principle, right? Of the core thing. But phenomenological analysis carries out its function only on condition of being truly complete. In other words, truly complete. We must be certain that all possible types of authority have been enumerated, and that each of them has been decomposed into simple elements that are irreducible to other elements. So you have to look at every type and reduce it. In other words, in order to do the phenomenology, we must have a complete account of all the possible, types. Okay, and then make sure that each type has been enumerated, that each one of them has decomposed into truly simple elements that are irreducible to other. It's the element that defines the type has to be irreducible, cannot be something that can be. By irreducible means that only explains that. It also cannot explain something else. It is only valid for this, not valid also for something else. That's irreducible means to the other element. This is possible, however, only if the analysis is systemic. That is why we must necessarily move beyond the phenomenological plane and rise to the metaphysical level. So you have to go to the next level. Once we understand the phenomenological and understand the things, then we have to go to the metaphysical level, which is A2. The metaphysical level relates the phenomena of authority to the fundamental structure of the objectively real world. In this way, it allows us to see whether the described phenomena corresponds to all possibilities provided by the world, and whether a given phenomena has a simple or compound metaphysical origin. Finally, the complete justification of the theory on the theory founded on and guaranteed by the metaphysical analysis can derive only from an even more profound analysis, which penetrates down to the ontological level. So this is very interesting. Following Hegel, we have the phenomena, metaphysical, and ontological. Okay. And therefore, the theory must operate at all three levels. The ontological analysis studies the structure of being as such, and it allows us to understand the whys and wherefores of the metaphysical structure of the real world. This same structure, for its part, allows us to classify and analyze systemically on the phenomenological level, the phenomena in question that appears in the world. So, note that in all these three analyses, the notion of God must be used, even assuming that the latter does not exist, being nothing other than myth. Okay, so therefore, it is even if it's only nothing but a myth. Since the believer has attributed to God the maximum of the authority, it therefore in him that this phenomena can be studied as if under a microscope. So it's not necessary that there is a God, but people's belief that the authority comes from God. And I would even argue that this is true for all of the categories. It's not that this thing exists then, but rather that of the belief of the actors, or the belief of the authoritative actors, the actors that are there. How does the system or the society or the thing view this? We shall avoid applying man to man that we discovered what we discovered. We shall avoid applying to man what we discover in God. It is precisely if God is nothing more than a myth that the analysis of divine authority is in fact analysis of human authority without realizing it. Man projects into God what he discovers, more or less unconsciously, in himself, in such a way that he can be studied while studying his God. So therefore, this is the idea that when we study God, we don't. In other words, we study man. We don't. By studying God, we don't. In other words, we should avoid applying to man what we discover in God. Why? Because what's happening is this is how man attributes to God, or the divine, what he sees in himself or reflects himself. He says unconsciously discovers without realizing it. Man projects onto God what he discovers more or less unconsciously in himself, in such a way that he can be studied while studying his God. The theories of authority that results from this triple analysis will be fully guaranteed and justified. It might serve in turn as a starting point for various deductions. Section B. The theory will have, first of all, political applications, B1, assuming that every state presupposes and is based on authority. The theory of the state can be deduced from the theory of authority. Secondly, the theory of authority will have ethical implications, B2. A correct and justified theory will make it possible to defend authority and the state, and specifically, therefore, the authoritarian state, against moral or moralizing critiques deduced from non-political notions. So notice this. This is his attempt to justify the authoritarian state. Again, this is the context of Patain's government, Vichy, right? In other words, the theory of authority will make possible a deduction of a specifically political ethics, which would essentially differ from private morality, that is generally the basis of attempts to criticize authority as being in its being and its acts. In other words, private morality. In other words, he's going to create a political understanding of morality, not a private morality. In other words, the theory of authority will make possible the deductions of a specifically political ethics, which will essentially differ from private morality. That is, that generally is the basis to criticize authority in its being and its acts. Finally, the theory of authority will have a psychological application. B3. Knowing what authority is, the way man and men must be acted on can be deduced, so either to engender or to maintain authority. Remember this. Finally, the psychological. So first, political, ethical, and psychological. Was why? Because psychological is knowing what authority is and the way man and men must be acted on can be deduced so as to engender or maintain the authority. And the psychology of things. And last but not least, in what follows, all these questions can be sketched out. I make no claim to lay down a deductive or complete theory of authority. We must rather formulate the problems and indicate general directions toward their resolution. Okay, I'm going to stop here. This is the first part. This is very, very simple, straightforward. The preliminary reflections. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below, and when I see them, I respond. If you have any, like I said, comments, questions, or things you want to say, please address them there. I will see them. If you like the video, like it, say hi, I like it, share it with a friend, share it with by social media, get it out there. If you now, of course, if you've not subscribed, please, and you want to continue to get this, please subscribe. And please contact your friends and people that you think would be interesting. Encourage them to subscribe. I'd like to grow the channel. Now, if you didn't like the video, you can always thumbs down, but say why in the comments. Why you don't? What was the thing you have an issue with? Was something technical wrong? I understand the fans are in the background because it's warm in here and I need to have air circulating. Otherwise, would stop. Couldn't do it here. But then we can, if it's substantive, some substantive issue that you think I did wrong, or said wrong, or misread or misunderstood, you can also say so in the comments as well. We can all learn from this, right? If you want to follow me on social media, the links are below. Another thing that you can do is if you want to help me do what I do, you want to contribute financially or means by some means, you can do so. You can always send me a check. You can always find me where bases and send, wire transfers. Okay, I'm not going to say that, but bad me. But money will help, right? It would be generous of them to do this. But you're doing it anyway. You're doing it for free. You must have okay, great, I understand. I'm doing a benefit now. Of course, only 300 people are currently members, but 300 plus people. But the ways you can do this is subscribe star on Patreon and be members to do that. Another way you can do it is by buying books. One of my 3 books, if you have not bought it already, and many of you probably have, encourage others to buy it. So buy one of the books. Okie dokie. Well, that's it. I hope you do it. We'll continue next time. Again, these are Tuesday, Thursdays postings. I will do the first, we start at page 7, the body of A1, introduction of this, A and A1 and possibility of A2, A1, and do that. Okay, that's it. Well, see you guys later. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye. Take care.